Good morning, Morai Rabotai, Bruchim Abayim. We're continuing on Masechet Rosh Hashanah, and we are on Daf Chaf Tet Amud Bet, the last three words by two dots on the Amud. We really went to Amud Aleph also, but we're going to come back to this to go down to the bottom of the Mishnah. Today's Amud is being learned as a Zchut Rufa Shelma for Rachel Simcha Bad Nahid, Daniel Moshe Ben Farangis V'Avraham, that should have Rufa Shelma b'toch Shar Cholei Yisrael. Today's Amud is also being learned Leilui Nishmat Harav Moshe Yisrael ben Harav Binyamin, Harav Ezra David ben Rav Naftali Halevi, that the Neshamot should have an aliyah. This month's learning of the Amud Yomi has been graciously dedicated by the Shalikar family. Should be an ultimate zchut for the health, happiness, prosperity, and parnasah of their family. Amen. And also has been dedicated, the entire learning of the community for this month has been graciously dedicated by the Shei family. It should be an ultimate zchut for the entire mishpacha. Amen.
Amen.
So, we learned in the Mishnah a three-way machloket of what exactly would be the obligation or the allowance of Tkiyat Shofar after the Churban. So the Mishnah told us that Yom Tov Av Rosh Hashanah, that will fall to be on Shabbat. When the Mikdash was there, they would blow Shofar in the Mikdash, which Rashi says Mikdash means in the Beit HaMikdash versus Yerushalayim. Rambam says Mikdash means Yerushalayim versus the rest of Eretz Yisrael. Aval lo b'Medina mishchara Beit HaMikdash. Again, these are series of Mishnayot of what happened at the time transitioning from Beit HaMikdash to the time of Galut after Churban Bayit Sheni. So this is the first Mishnah that we have. And Mishachara Bet HaMikdash, the Nasi of the generation, Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, Hitkin Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, Shetokin Bechol Makom Sheish Bo Bedin. Any place that you have Bedin, you do it. Rabbi Lazar said, no, he did only in Yavne. And the Gemara said, the Mishnah said, the Amrulo, which we subsequently learned that's a third shita, they told him no. He was metaken ben beyavne ben bekol sha'ar hamedinot, any other place that has bedin. And we learned in the Gemara that what the difference of Tanakama and Amrulo is, Tanakama holds any place that has any sort of bedin, you will blow shofar, because we're not choshesh that in front of the dayanim, in front of the bedin, you're going to come to carry the shofar on Shabbat. We're not concerned about that. So therefore, any place that you have bedin of any sort, you could do it. Rabbi Lazar says, no, it was only in Yavne. And Amrulo, the third shita is not any place that has bedin of any sort, but it has to be a type of bedin that's bedin kavua. It's not a temporary bedin, traveling bedin on the wheels that now popped up here in this town and happens to be the bedin is in this town, but this is the bedin of the town. This is a kavua bedin. So then the Mishnah said some very interesting words. When the Mishnah wanted to say that's not just in Yavne that Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai instituted this allowance of blowing shofar in the place of Bedin on Shabbat even, says the Mishnah, Ve'od zot, pay attention, Ve'od zot hayta Yerushalayim yetra. Not only this, but another advantage that Yerushalayim had over Yavne. In other words, not only Yavne was not better than Yerushalayim, because that's what Rabbi Lazar suggested, that the allowance was only made in Yavne by Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. The Gemara says, not only that that's not true, Ve'od zot, also another advantage over Yerushalayim over Yavne was that any place that was close to Yerushalayim and was able to see it and hear it and come to it would blow shofar as well. Now the problem is the Odzot. Odzot suggests that it was not just one but another. But you didn't tell me the first one. Right? You told me the second one. It also is better. Also is better means there is one thing, and then there is a second thing. You never told me what the first thing is, that Yerushalayim has over. Yeah, so we're going to be dealing with this to clarify some details of this halacha. So take a look at the two dots, last line of the Gemara. Amru lo echad yavne ve'echad kol makom sheyesh po bedin. They said to Rabbi Elazar, any place that has a bedin like Yavne, bedin kavua, you will blow on Shabbat. Rosh Hashanah that fell to be on Shabbat. Amar Rav Huna. So Rav Huna said, wait. This place of bedin, it doesn't just mean a city that has bedin, but the bedin went on sabbatical somewhere. But it's not a din in this city. It's a din of doing it in front of the bedin. So it has to mamash be in front of the bedin. The dayanim have to be there, so to speak. Ve'im bedin. So the Gemara says, wait a second. When you say with the bedin, what do you mean exactly? My ve'im bedin. I could understand ve'im bedin in several different ways. If you want to suggest ve'im bedin, my ve'im bedin, bifnei bedin, la'afuke shelo bifnei bedin. The law in front of bedin it has to be to exclude when you're not mamash in front of the bedin. So the Gemara says, Mativ Rava says, ve'od zot ayda Yerushalayim yetera al Yavne. This that we learned the Mishnah, ve'od zot that Yerushalayim had another advantage over Yavne. So what's the first advantage? My ve'od zot. What do you mean another one? If you want to tell me the simple understanding of the Mishnah, that the advantage was that in Yerushalayim, even places that could see here come and be close to Yerushalayim also would blow shofar, then zot mi baile. That is one, right? What's ve'od zot? My ve'od zot. The Yerushalayim tokin yechidin ubi Yavne and tokin yechidin. Says the Gemara, let us suggest that what it means is in Yerushalayim, the yechidim would blow shofar, and in Yavne, they would not do any tokin yechidin. Only the bedin would do it. And that's what it means. Says the Gemara, V'hakiata Rabbi Yitzchak bar Yosef, when Rabbi Yitzchak bar Yosef came from Yavne, he said, Ki mesayim shlichut hatzibur hatekiya b'Yavne, when the Shliach Tzibur would finish blowing shofar in Yavne, for some odd reason, every Yachid would take out their shofar and they would start blowing sets of tkiyot. Lo shama inish kol une. You couldn't hear anything in your ears. Mikal tkiyata de'echidai. From the noise, the rash of all the tkiyot that Yechidim, single individuals, would blow afterwards. Now, this, by the way, we mentioned already in Daf Chav Zayin, earlier on, that even though that Trei Kali Lo Mishtami, even though that you can't hear two simultaneous voices at the same time, but shofar, because people love shofar, Megillah, those things that you're very interested to hear, you can even have different people blow, and you will be hearing it still and be yotze. And Allah the Yerushalayim took in ben bizman bedin, u ben shlo bizman bedin. Says no, the difference has to be that in Yerushalayim, they will blow whether it's the time for bedin, whether it's not time for bedin, right? Bedin had their clock in, clock out. They would go home at some point, right? They would work until the 6th hour. That was the time frame of the bedin every day. So bizman bedin means within the 6 hours of the day. So it must be, you see, because see the yechidim would blow. So it's not just the bedin that would do it. The individuals would be blowing shofar afterwards as well, so much so that you can hear a thing. So the difference between Yerushalayim and Yavne can't be that in Yerushalayim yechidim would be allowed to blow shofar, and in Yavne yechidim would not be allowed to blow shofar, because you see yechidim were blowing shofar in Yavne, right? Story that he said. So must be the difference is, in Yerushalayim, they would do Bizman Bedin and Shelo Bizman Bedin. That means whether it was before the 6th hour or after the 6th hour, you would be allowed to blow shofar in Yerushalayim, but not in Yavne. Yavne was more restricted, right? I mean, Yavne for sure was more restricted. The question is, what is the restriction of Yavne? It can't be that restriction of Yavne is that the Yechidim didn't blow shofar, because the Yechidim did blow shofar, we just said. So maybe it's the time frame. That in Yerushalayim, the time frame extended even after 6th hour, which was no longer Zeman Bedin. And now in Yavne, you only could do it within the 6 hours, which is Zeman Bedin, but not afterwards. So it says, the Gemara, Ubeyavne Zeman Bedin in Shelo Bizman Bedin lo. Maybe that's what it is. But ha Bizman Bedin miatok in. But you see that even in Yavne, even the Yechidim, they could do it within the 6 hours, the first 6 hours, which is Zeman Bedin, which indicates that what we care about is Zeman Bedin, not Bifnei Bedin. Right? So long as it's within 6 hours of the morning, you could do it. Where? It doesn't say. Does it have to be Bifnei Bedin or Lichora not? Right? So that obviously goes against what Rav Huna said. Rav Huna said, Ve'im Bedin means in front of Bedin. Right? So this seems to be going against that. And that's the kasha of the Gemara. Says the Gemara, Va'afilu shelo bifnei bedin. What says no? Lo. De'ilu b'Yerushalayim tokim bifnei bedin, ben bifnei bedin ben shelo bifnei bedin. What it means is, in Yerushalayim, you could blow shofar, whether it's bifnei bedin, whether the bedin is there, or even if the bedin is not there, right? Pnei Yehoshua, by the way, just parenthetically, Pnei Yehoshua over here asks, he says, wait a second, how do you reconcile that? It's a big question, because in Yerushalayim, and the cities around it, the areas around it, and it's not in front of Bedin, why aren't you concerned that people are going to come to get nervous and carry? That's the whole thing is, you're concerned people are going to get, nervous and come to carry on Shabbat. And the Bifnei Bedin is supposed to somehow reconcile that concern. So you're telling me in Yerushalayim, you could do it Shelo Bifnei Bedin, and Yechidim are doing it, and even in the cities surrounding, you have to reconcile how exactly this concern is alleviated of people coming to get nervous and running out on Shabbat, not realizing that they're carrying on Shabbat. Okay, it's a question to think about, food for thought. Says the Gemara, that's what it means. It means in Yerushalayim you would do it whether Bifnei Bedin or even not Bifnei Bedin. In Yavne, it has to be Bifnei Bedin Mamash. So when Rav Huna said, in Bedin, means that you have to actually do it in front of the Dayanim, in front of the Bedin. Ubeyavne Bifnei Bedin, in Shelo Bifnei Bedin, lo. So that's one way of saying Rav Huna. Ika dematni lo Rav Huna, aha. There are those who say this Rav Huna, Bichlal was not said about Rosh Hashanah altogether. In other words, what did Rav Huna say? Rav Huna said, Ve'im Bedin means Bifnei Bedin. It has to be im Bedin. This that you blow shofar has to be until Rav Huna came. Right? We thought you blow shofar wherever you are. Right? Rav Huna said no. It has to be Bifnei im Bedin, let's call it that way. His language was ve'im Bedin. Now, we thought, up until now, that Rav Huna was talking about the blowing of the shofar of Rosh Hashanah. It has to be in front of Bedin, and we went back and forth. We had questions, we answered them. There are those who say this whole comment of Rav Huna was never made on Rosh Hashanah, was made on Yom Kippur, for Yom Kippur. Ika de matni lehad Rav Huna, the first wide line. Ika de matni lehad Rav Huna, aha. Dichtiv, biyom HaKippurim taviru shofar bechol arsechem. This that the pasuk says on Yom Kippur you blow shofar once in 50 years, the year of Yovel, says the Gemara Melamed, Shkol Yachid veYachid Chayav Litkoa. Ta'aviru shofar is plural form to tell you that every Yachid veYachid is going to be blowing shofar on Yom Kippur of Yovel. Amar Rav Huna, and on that, Rav Huna said ve'im bedin. Not just every Yachid veYachid doing it in their backyard, but it means, yes, Yachidim could do it, but so long as is with bedin. And now you go understand what with bedin means. In front of bedin, zman of bedin, right? But the whole comment of Rav Huna was made on the blowing of the shofar once in 50 years on Yom Kippur. So now, the Gemara is going to go through the whole loops that we had with Rav Huna's memra. My ve'im bedin. What does Rav Huna mean on Yom Kippur? You have to blow shofar every yachid, but with bedin. Bisman bedin. La'afuka shelo bisman bedin. Says the Gemara, it means you're doing it within the 6 hours of the day, which is the time of the bedin, but not afterwards. Not shelo bisman bedin. Mativ Rava says, wait a second. Tekiot Rosh Hashanah veYovel. Again, the Gaon takes the Rosh Hashanah out of here, but the Tosfot is clear that they had it. So we just keep the girsa. Tekiot Rosh Hashanah veYovel. Docha et HaShabbat bigvulin ish ubeto. The Tekiot of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is Docha Shabbat. Right? That means even on Shabbat you will blow. And it is for ish ubeto. How do we translate ish ubeto? How do you translate that?
Man in his house.
Man in his house. What does that mean? His family, which usually means his wife. Ish ubeto is a man and his spouse, his wife. That's what it means. So you watch this basically. My ish ubeto. How do you if you want to translate it like we normally would translate ish ubeto? Ilma ish ve'ishto is referring to a husband and wife. Itata mi mechayva. Well, a woman, since when a woman is mechuyav to shofar of Yom Kippur? If there's one mitzvah that's besides Shazman Grama comes once in 50 years, right? That's the tkiyah of shofar, the shofar of Yovel. Obviously, she is not chayav, right? Mi mechayva va mitzvah Shazman Grama. V'chol mitzvah Shazman Grama nashim pturot. Women are absolved from time-bound positive mitzvot. Ela lav ish bebeto. It means ish ubeto means in his house. It's a private mitzvah. You do it in your backyard. Va'afilu shelo bisman bedin. And once you're doing it at home, maybe it covers also whenever you want, wherever you want, and whenever you want. The Gemara says no. Lo leolam bisman bedin. The house, you're right. You could do it in your house. It doesn't have to be in front of anybody, but it's bisman bedin, right? It has to be in the time that the bedin sits. Mativ Rosh Hashanah asked, Shaveh Yovel Rosh Hashanah Tkiot v'livrachot. We learned, and this is not the first time we're having this, that Rosh Hashanah is Shaveh, it's equal to Yom Kippurim, both in the Tkiot Shofar and also in the Nusach HaTfilah, right? אלא שיובל תוקעים בו בבדין שקידשו בו את החודש, ובין בבדין שלא קידשו בו את החודש. In Yovel, you could blow shofar בין בבדין שקידשו בו את החודש, whether it's in a Sanhedrin HaGadol, the bedin of 71 dayanim, which would be fit for Kiddush HaChodesh, and whether it's not, whether it's a different bedin. On Yovel, you could do in front of any bedin. But on Rosh Hashanah, that's the difference between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. They're equal in everything else. The difference is, on Yom Kippur, you don't need a Bedin HaGadol, a Sanhedrin, but on Rosh Hashanah, you need a Bedin HaGadol. V'chol yachid v'yachid chayav litko. And also, every yachid v'yachid on Yom Kippur does it. ובראש השנה לא היו תוקעים אלא בבדין שקידשו בו את החודש. On Rosh Hashanah they would only be able to do in a bedin שקידשו בו את החודש, which means Sanhedrin of 71 dayanim. And also, en kol yachid v'yachid chayav litkoa. Not every yachid v'yachid is obligated to blow shofar. Right? So this is a combination of the type of bedin. Also, ta'aviru shofar b'chol arsechem, which indicates on Yom Kippur, it's a plural form, everyone should do it. And on Rosh Hashanah, not every yachid v'yachid is obligated. So says the Gemara, my en kol yachid v'yachid chayav litkoa. When you say on Rosh Hashanah, not every yachid v'yachid is chayav to blow shofar, what does that mean exactly? If you want to tell me that literally, literal translation would be that on Rosh Hashanah, the Yechidin would not be allowed to blow shofar. Only the Shaliach Tzibur could do it. Only the Bedin could do it. Obviously, we know that that's not true. Why? Because V'haki ata Rav Yitzchak Bar Yosef, we just had this, that when Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Yosef came, he said, Amar ki Yava Mesayim Shlichat Tzibur T'Kiyavata B'Yavne, that when in Yavne, Shaliach Tzibur would finish, all the Yechidim would pull out their shofarot and they would start blowing away. Lo shama inish kal une mikal T'Kiyata D'Yechidai. Every Yachid was blowing shofar so much so that you couldn't hear anything. So definitely on Rosh Hashanah, Yechidim would blow shofar. So that's not what he means. When it says on Yom Kippur, the Yechidim would do it, and on Rosh Hashanah, Yechidim wouldn't do it, certainly doesn't mean that Yechidim wouldn't do it. So what's the difference? And alav the ilu beyovel tokin ben bizman bedin ben shlo bizman bedin. It must mean that on Yom Kippur and Yovel, the Yechidim would blow shofar, whether it's in bizman bedin within the first 6 hours of the day, whether not bizman bedin, or Rosh Hashanah bizman bedin in shlo bizman bedin lo. On Rosh Hashanah, it's limited to only zeman bedin. Right? That's what it means. It must mean. Gemara says, what we learn from this is, at least, that beyovel ben bizman bedin ben shlo bizman bedin, you would blow shofar. That on Yovel, you would do it ben bizman bedin ben shlo bizman bedin. This is not like who? Not like Rav Huna. Again, we're going back now in the second Ika de Amri, Ika de Matnila. We said that Rav Huna mentioned his comment about the blowing of the shofar on Yom Kippur. And on that, Rav Huna said that you could blow shofar on Yom Kippur im betin. And we translated that to mean that on Yom Kippur you could only blow shofar bizman betin, within the first 6 hours. Now we went through all of this loop to say that you see clearly from this Braita that on Yom Kippur, the blowing of the shofar was ben bifnei bedin, ben bizman bedin, ben shlo bizman bedin. Even after the 6th hour, you could blow shofar, right? So says the Gemara, no, that's not what it means. What it means is leolam bizman bedin. It has to always be within the 6 hours. That's pashut. Ve'hachi katani. This is how he says it. This is how to translate and understand the Braita. Beyovel bizman bedin took in ben bifnei bedin ben shlo bifnei bedin. On Yom Kippur of Yovel, you have to do it within 6 hours, but within the 6 hours could be whether in front of the actual bedin in their presence or even not in their presence, so long as it's within the 6 hours. That's what he means, which really goes together with what Rav Huna said. And on Rosh Hashanah, took in bizman bedin ubifnei bedin. On Rosh Hashanah, it has to be not just within the 6 hours, but it also has to be mamash in presence of the dayanim that you could blow shofar. So yes, we have a leniency, a kula on Yom Kippur over Rosh Hashanah, but the kula is very much in sync with what Rav Huna said. There has to be im bedin. Im bedin means in the time of the sitting of the bedin, which means within the first 6 hours. But the leniency is you don't have to be mamash the same room with the dayanim. On Rosh Hashanah, it has to be within the 6 hours, bizman bedin, and also it has to be bifnei bedin. Right? Says Gemara, Itmar Nami. We also learned, similar to this, Amar Bar Gamda, Amar Yossi ben Shaul, Amar Rebbe. This chain of command, En tok in ela kol zman shebedin yoshvin we can't blow shofar unless the time that the bedin is sitting, right? By Rav Zera asked the $1 million question, said, how about if their time is finished, that means 6 hours finished already, but the dayanim are still sitting. They're still there. So in practicality, the dayanim are there. Nin aru la'amod, they started moving to get up, that means their time finished, right? The 6 hours. Velo amdu, but they haven't gotten up yet. They're mamash still sitting in the place of bedin. Bedin yoshvin ba'inan, do we need bedin to be there sitting? And we have it, it's sitting there. Or maybe we need it to be within 6 hours. So even though that they're working overtime, so to speak, it's not going to be good because we need it to be within the zman of bedin, the regular zman of bedin. And the Gemara says we don't have a clear answer for this. We'll wait for Mashiach to come. Says the Gemara, the last piece over here of the Mishnah was that not only Yerushalayim you could blow shofar, but even places that are adjacent to Yerushalayim. If you have all of these 4 criteria, explains Rashba, then you need all 4 of them. Then even if you're outside of Yerushalayim, on Rosh Hashanah that is chal liot b'Shabbat, you could blow shofar. What does this 4 mean? Right? What's the criteria? Says the Gemara. Ve'od zot hayta Yerushalayim yetera al yavneim ro'a prat leyoshevet benachal. A city that sees Yerushalayim is excluding a city that's in the valley and down there in the dip, and because of that can't see Yerushalayim. That's one, even though that's very close. Shomat prat leyoshevet berosh hahar. If it's sitting on top of a mountain, even though that it is definitely able to see, right, and it's close by, but it's up there, so the distance is a lot in the air, right, and it can't hear it, so that's excluded. Krova prat liyoshevet chutz latchum. It has to be close, so anything that's outside of the tchum of the city is automatically excluded. V'yechola lavo means, and even if you're not in a dip, and you're not on top of a mountain, and you're not farther than the amount of the tchum, you're mamash close. But there's a river, practical problem, right? Technicalities of not being able to get to Yerushalayim because there's a river without a bridge in between you and Yerushalayim. Prat lemafsik la nara. All of those cases, you cannot blow shofar. It has to be a scenario in which you have all 4 criteria met. You're mamash close to Yerushalayim within the tchum. There's nothing stopping you from coming. You could hear it, you could see it, and then you could blow shofar even though that you're not in Yerushalayim. And today we have learned, by the way, at least the beginning of the idea of why everyone disagrees with the Ramban that we mentioned, right? We mentioned Ramban used to blow shofar on Rosh Hashanah that felt to be on Shabbat in his bedin, right? And when you learn the Mishnah, you're like, wow, everyone should be doing that. No? At least if you have a bedin kavua, you should be doing that. But today we learned one line that it has to be a bedin compared to the Sanhedrin that was a bedin of Kiddush HaChodesh, right? The bedin of 71 dayanim. So we have something to keep in mind for maybe, hopefully, a rate bite that will be upcoming. Chazak Baruch.